What's up, guys? This is Mike Casu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week, I interviewed the founders of ROMWOD, Range of Motion Workout of the Day. If you haven't heard of or used ROMWOD before, it's basically an online yoga company. So you can either follow along with their daily yoga sessions, or you can click I want to recover from, or I want to prepare. Then you click what muscles you want to work on, and then how long you want that session to take. For those of you that are familiar with ROMWOD, you've been using it, we go into some of their explanations for why they do things the way they do, why the poses are as long as they are, why it's so important to focus on the breath. So from the physical sense as well as the mental, emotional side of things, we get a lot of good explanations here. So a lot of good stuff. Hopefully you enjoy the show. All right, what's up, guys? I really appreciate you guys being here. I am absolutely thrilled with what you guys are doing. You're teaching people. You're obviously getting people more flexible, moving better, feeling better. But you're also making it cool to follow the breath and to be present. All of these things that I value so much in my own life, and I recommend to so many people. But you found a way to make it cool, and this community has so much to appreciate about you guys. So I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Very cool. Thank you. So are we.
Awesome. So can you guys really quickly recap, maybe Jeremiah, can you really quickly recap kind of what was the issue that you saw in the community that made you say, hey, I think we really need to get yoga into this space more?
Yeah. So, like we were talking about earlier, my background was in coaching at first. So I coached a lot of athletes, a lot of girls volleyball players, and I kept running into my biggest problem as a coach for the last 20 years has been injuries, and preventing injuries and dealing with injuries. And my brother has always been into the martial arts and yoga world. And so even as a coach outside of CrossFit, and then once I got into CrossFit, I always would send my athletes to him to get more flexible. I just intrinsically knew that it was going to help. I just, I didn't have all the tools and my resources to help with that. And so once, I stopped coaching and I got into owning my own gym, and myself being an older, I'm 40, my flexibility is nothing, never been really good. Same kind of a thing, like I would try yoga and it didn't quite work for me just because I couldn't focus for an hour and 45 minutes in the class. It just wasn't my thing. But what we saw is in our little tiny city, there's 8 CrossFits, but every class, there was tons of CrossFitters coming in every day, just filling up his yoga studio. And so, what we saw was everyone knew that there was a problem or a need. I guess not a problem, but there was a need there for flexibility, but no one really knew exactly the answer, and they just thought yoga was the answer. But what we found is yoga, the typical yoga, which would be more of a vinyasa yoga, which is more of a workout, is really not what we're looking for, because it's actually a workout. Like, it's actually exhausting. It's lengthening the muscles. It's kind of blowing out your posterior. And so it kind of did the wrong thing in that we would go do those classes, but the next day, what we wanted to accomplish in the gym was really hard to do, because we were actually more tired than the day before,
right? Because
our muscles had been lengthened and stretched. And so it was, we started searching for an answer. And so that's kind of where it started, was how do we find this answer?
Right. My buddy Sammy is really going to hate this, but for years, I've really disliked yoga because most of it, you're saying vinyasa, right? That's one form of yoga.
Yes.
it's kind of in between, really, really hard, strenuous work like CrossFit and complete rest. And I'm, kind of a black and white thinker. I just really don't like things kind of in that gray area. If I'm going to do something restorative, I want it to feel easy and restorative. So when I finally found Yin Yoga, I was like, man, this is something different. This is amazing. And so I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but how did you guys, what led you guys to choose more of this Yin style yoga? And if it's not that, what do you guys define it as?
It definitely is. No, it definitely is. Yeah. So what happened is like I said, I did a couple yoga classes and I told them like, no, this isn't working. Kind of same thing that you said. Like I want my rest day to be a rest day, and it wasn't. It was making it worse. So my brother's background is actually in martial arts. So when he was as young as 14, he was in the martial arts world, and he was in that world. And in that world, Yin style of stretching is law. It's what they do. It's how they start every class. It's what, when you go back, thousands of years, it's how all the martial artists, what they did every morning was Yin stretching. It was how they prepared for their day, because that's, in case there was a war or fight, they had to fight with their hands, so they had to be ready to fight. There was no like, hey, wait, I got to get warmed up real quick. So, kind of funny, like my brother was obsessed with like the Van Damme type things back in the day, doing the big splits on the chairs. And so what his instructors had him do way back then was Yin stretching and holding these poses for 3, 4, 5 minutes at a time so that he could attain this insane range of motion. And, by the time he was 16, 17-year-old, he was doing the full splits on the ground. He could kick his foot up 7 feet in the air, like the whole thing. It was, and so what happened is he kind of went back to that. He went back to, let's look at this. And in the yoga world, Yin is kind of making a resurgence in that a lot of the yogis, I guess you would call them, the top yoga instructors in the country, they actually do Yin for their own personal training, so that when they go and do yoga, they are more flexible and they have better range of motion. So it's kind of like funny that it's their training system as far as getting better range of motion, just like it is ours now. So and so he introduced it to me. He said, hey, let's try this. I have an idea. We're going to tap into my martial arts background. And but again, the same thing happened was he threw a 60-minute routine at me. And it was too long. Again, I was like, man, this is too much, blowing me out. Mentally, I had a hard time focusing, kind of the same thing. So that's when we started playing with the formula. Like, okay, let's see what we can do. How long does it have to be? What kind of poses do we need? Let's throw in the breathing. So that was kind of the birth of it.
Love it. Let me ask you this. How do you guys come up with the progressions? Is there a logical approach to that, or y'all just throwing in random progressions based on what people want to recover or prepare for? How do y'all go about thinking about those things?
Like the weekly programming kind of a thing?
I guess I'm kind of thinking your tool at the bottom of the website, I want to, and I click recover. I want to recover my hamstrings, hips, etc., and I want it to last this long. How do you come up with that formula?
I think initially we just played around with stuff. We were like, let's try these different routines. And then once we realized which poses were best useful for different moves or different body parts, we started structuring workouts around movements, I guess. And then that's how we kind of started building that filter system. At one point I spent a lot of time just kind of researching all the different programs that I could get my hands on and kind of seeing if I could find a pattern. I couldn't. So we just started thinking, okay, let's really focus on certain body parts and let's really hit those, maybe in one day. So that's why you'll see lots of different days, maybe where it'll be really hip centric, and then maybe the next day is more hamstrings, and the next day maybe it's more shoulder. Because we still wanted to keep that CrossFit mentality of making sure that if you do ROMWOD the whole week, you're going to hit everything. You're not going to be lacking.
Right.
Because of course, what we're going to do is intrinsically we're going to go and do maybe either what we're best at or what we're worst at, and we're going to forget the other part, And so with that search engine at the bottom, we just started creating routines, and then we started looking at every routine and going, what does this hit? and we created, let's do a whole bunch of videos that we know will increase the squats, and let's do one that will increase the snatch and those things. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't, it definitely was thought out. Like we put thought into it. So
Right.
yeah, we're still thinking about it, making it better. Yes.
Why is it important to or I guess, why do you put emphasis on focusing on the breath? And I want to hear your answer in terms of, mentally, even spiritually, if you want to go there, but also physically. Why is that important?
Yeah, and so what's kind of interesting is in actual Yin Yoga, there actually, if you were to go to most Yin Yoga classes, or if you've been looking historically, there's not actually a big emphasis on breath. So that actually isn't a part of Yin Yoga.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique to ROMWOD. So it was one thing that we wanted to include the breathing. We knew that, there's a lot of benefits for the breathing. When you inhale really large through your nose and exhale through the nose, just nose breathing in general.
Mm-hmm.
You probably heard my brother say it on the videos. It stimulates the vagus nerve.
Yep.
And so what it does is it actually calms your nervous system down. So it's a way for your body to relax. It's it actually helps that. And so what, my brother knew, again, with his 10 years of owning a yoga studio, is that if he can get your nervous system to relax, he can get your body to relax. And if he can get your body to relax, you're going to get open faster. You're going to get those hips and joints to relax because your whole body's relaxing. So, and from a physical standpoint, he knew that was going to help. From a mental standpoint, as an athlete and as a coach, I found that if we can focus on breathing, or like you said, even just the peace of mind, the calmness, and as far as like coaching and working at a gym, it's hectic. I mean, it's just a lot going on as an athlete. So, they're kind of that right from the beginning. We call it that warrior mentality of kind of calming the mind before battle or after battle, just getting prepared in a mental state. And I know it's funny, that was kind of when we started dealing with some of our top athletes, that was their first their first thing they said was how much they enjoyed that. They enjoyed that mental 20 minutes of mental relaxation or kind of refocusing. So it definitely serves for multiple purposes for different people, but it definitely helps. And like you said, like a religious thing, I know a lot of people love just to meditate, and so this is a great way to zone out and meditate. It can be the same kind of a thing. Absolutely.
Right. Let's see. Do you get people? Have you gotten any stories about that part affecting people kind of like chronically, either mentally or emotionally?
Like the breathing part or the mental focus part?
Yes.
Yeah, we definitely do. We get lots of really, really cool emails every week. That's really one of the fun things about that I get to do, is I get to answer and look at a lot of emails. But I get all the really fun emails. I don't get like the, hey, the website's not working emails.
Right.
So yeah, we get some really cool ones where we've had people with, kind of debilitating diseases where maybe they couldn't move or different things. And they would tell us, their breathing and just the meditation, kind of relaxes their body. I'm trying to think of some specifically. I know there's been some really wild ones that we've gotten, just amazing stories of how much it's helped them, overcome problems. So definitely, yeah, we get those. A lot. We try not to. We always keep those secret. We're not sharing those out there with the world. But
right.
Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
I love that. I love that you combine the two, even though it's not necessarily traditionally practiced in Yin. It's like a more bang for your buck type thing.
Exactly.
Why is it important for you to be relaxed? And not to pull? Like what is the difference physiologically there? Like if I was to say pull on my shins rather than just hang in like a forward fold.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of different there's a lot of different ideas, I guess, out there as far as stretching goes. And so a lot of times, my brother will say like there's a lot of 30-second stretching or minute stretching, and what research even shows is that when you hang out in a position and you relax, there's that window actually around 2 or 3 minutes, and sometimes like even those 4 and 5 minute holds, where the body finally kind of gives in and releases. And because it's done in a passive way and not an aggressive way, what that does is it allows your body to stay open longer. It's more of a natural process versus a forced process. Kind of like one of the ways we talk about the most is like I can force, I could force like my hips open if I throw 135 pounds on my back and I squat a few times. Right? I'll kind of force that position. But what will happen is it's going to add warmth to my body. It's going to add warmth to my ligaments, and so my body's technically going to kind of warm up. And inevitably, if my body warms up, it has to warm down. It has to cool down. So then it'll tighten up quick.
Right.
Whereas if it's done in a passive, very non-aggressive way, in a cold setting, if you can do it first thing in the morning or when you're not inflamed, your body will then stay open longer because it doesn't have to tighten back up. It's done in that really passive way, and so there's not as much of a fight in your body. So it is very important to do it passively and allow that to happen naturally because and that's kind of talking about when we talk about fascia and stuff, we talk about that later. Kind of the same kind of a theory is it takes time for that to like separate or shred, I guess would be the word we would use, not with shredding, but it's kind of dissipating. Okay. It takes time under tension, but that really light tension for that to dissipate and to release and to go back to where it's supposed to be. So that's very important.
And then what exactly do you mean? What is dissipating?
So a lot of times what's going on and kind of just talking about fascia is, fascia is kind of this unique thing right now that's going on in the world. People studying fascia and how do we deal with fascia and what is fascia. And we know that like there's kind of three different types of fascia, and there's the outer layer of fascia, which is just this superficial fascia, and what that's doing is just kind of holding everything together. And then there's more deep fascia, and so what it is, it's kind of this connective tissue that's holding everything together. Well, we have fascia, and it's good for us. It's our natural. It's a tissue that's naturally connecting everything.
Right, and it's not like multiplying or subtracting. It's all just there, and it kind of rearranges, exactly. Right?
Well, it does, but like we actually can add fascia as far as like the thickness of it when we do any kind of high repetitive movement, which CrossFit happens to be like, the worst of all time, or even like running a marathon or any kind of super high repetitive movement. What happens is the fascia actually builds up, and it's not like it's getting super like thick necessarily, but it actually builds up. And, in our seminar, we actually talk about where they actually can find cadavers that actually have a thicker layer of fascia on them if they had died or something after doing, some sort of high rep thing. It's pretty fascinating what's going on out there. So what happens is that builds up. So there's a couple ways to get at it, right? Which we know a lot of people, it's the rolling, it's that. And that's that superficial outer layer fascia. So that part you can kind of, when you roll it, you're breaking it apart and dissipating it, and it's going out. But there's an entire inner super deep fascia that you can't get to without really stretching. And the only way to do it is that passive stretching. And what happens is by kind of allowing the body to open up, allowing that fascia to shred kind of, it's not shredding, but just kind of dissipating over time, is it just kind of pulls apart and you get rid of only the excess fascia. And so you go back to the way you're supposed to be, the way, we're designed to be. And the cool thing about fascia is it's extremely energy efficient material. So the really dense fascia that's like deep inside our muscles, it's somewhere between 2 and 8 times the strength of the muscle that it's surrounding. So it's kind of this tricky, powerful thing that we found was if you can get your fascia to be, back to where it's supposed to be, you can strip away the excess, the stuff that you don't need, and you surround these really strong muscles with really elastic, efficiently moving fascia, you come away with, amazing movements, guys that are PRing, ladies that are PRing, and that's kind of what is kind of going on, I guess.
Right. You touched on something, kind of breezed right over. The temperature of the muscle. Yes. Is there any benefit to, hot yoga is a big thing. Is there any benefit to doing this Yin Yoga, ROMWOD, or even stretching in a warm environment at all? If it's just going to cool back down, how does that work?
Exactly. No, this is actually a really good topic to talk about because we get this question a lot, and we we actually see it even on social. A lot of times we'll see people's ideas of when they want to do ROMWOD, and we definitely have, not opinion, I guess, but the way that we understand it and the way that we would do it. Yeah. So for instance, if you were to do yoga, it would be a hot yoga. And the reason they do it so hot is it immediately warms the muscles up. And so it allows them to get into these crazy poses. Because in yoga, it's all about attaining these crazy positions. But with ROMWOD or Yin Yoga, it's the opposite. You do not want to be warm necessarily. You actually want to do it in a very cold environment. Not that you want to go do it like in a freezer, but what I'm saying is you don't want to do it before you warm up. You want it to be the very first thing that you do.
Gotcha.
And the one way that we can I could verbally describe it or visually describe it is, imagine a thick rubber band and a skinny rubber band. And if you put those two rubber bands together, the skinny rubber band would represent a warm muscle. So it's gonna bend very easily, and the thick rubber band is gonna represent kind of like ligaments and tendons. So if I pulled on those two rubber bands, this skinny warm muscle is going to stretch. So if I'm doing ROMWOD, I'm stretching, and my muscle is already warm. All I'm going to do is stretch that muscle, and I'm not going to get into those connective tissues because I can't, because the muscle is already giving way.
Okay.
So if I were to do So a lot of people will do a ROMWOD after right after they work out, they'll hit the ground and do a ROMWOD, and they'll email like, "Oh man, I feel it like almost painful, and it's not as effective." And they're right, it's not as effective because their tissues are already inflamed, their muscles are already warm, and so they can't really get into the areas that we really would like to get into with ROMWOD. The opposite would be if I have a cold muscle and a cold ligament. Those two things they're gonna stretch equally. They're gonna have equal tension on them, and so I'm going to be able to open both, and that's gonna get kind of the results that we want. So we do recommend doing ROMWOD before you do anything, or after you've cooled down, maybe.
Okay.
So maybe late at night. So I know a lot of people love to do it at night. That's a great time to do it. First thing in the morning. I do mine first thing in the morning when I get to the gym, and then I coach a class, and then I go through the warm up. So it's the very first thing that I do. Yeah.
Right. That's very, very good feedback.
Yeah.
Why do you think traditional, say, physical therapy and stuff like that, where does this whole thing of, getting like, say, 4 sets of 30 seconds, 4 sets of 1 minute stretches, where does that come from? And, where do you think that's coming from?
Yeah. My brother would have more answers on that as far as like where that came from. I think it's kind of funny because even in the yoga world and the stretching world, right, there's like these cycles of stretching is good for you, stretching is bad for you. Don't stretch, now you should stretch. It's kind of a cyclical. And I think in my estimation and kind of what I've seen, and even again going into kind of my coaching background, where in sports that I've coached, even at the collegiate level, there's such little time taken in this area with athletes that I've seen, where it's almost like I think everyone's been so obsessed with getting the work done, like I came to lift or I came to practice, that it's like, from kind of my point of view is, yeah, we do need to stretch a little bit, so let's do it really fast, sets of 30 seconds, and then let's move on,
Right.
and kind of warm up. And, that's kind of just my own, what I've seen as a coach in sports. And even in CrossFit, you'll see it in the box where so many people just don't take that time. They don't see how necessary it is. But I do know that there's different theories behind it, behind the 30-second stretches. I do know that as far as the yin world goes, that's why we almost always try to at least get a 1 minute stretch in. A lot of times, depending on the size of the joint, like the hips and those things, you'll see those really long holds that we'll do. Whereas maybe the shoulders, we'll only do like a 60 to 2 minute hold, just because it doesn't require as much time under tension, I guess.
Gotcha. Before I forget to ask this, while we're on that topic, how or is there any benefit to, say, hanging out in a posture position for 10 to 20 minutes? Is that going to do any harm? Can you get even further into the position? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, the longest one I've done is we have a video called Hamstring Hell, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
seated forward fold for 10 minutes. And there is no damage. So I know that there is a limit. So 20 minutes is the maximum amount of time. So beyond that 20-minute mark, from what I understand, that's pretty much the maximum time that you would ever want to sit in anything.
Okay.
You cannot get more open than a 20-minute position. Mentally, it's very hard. Like if you want to challenge yourself,
Right.
that 10-minute hamstring hold is very hard. But you will, I'm very tight in my hamstrings and lower back, and
Mm-hmm.
I inevitably will always get my head to my knees by the end of that 10 minutes. Um,
Nice.
I actually filmed that video, and my brother didn't tell me that's what we were doing that day, and I was like, oh man, this is not going to be fun. But
Nice.
so yeah, you definitely can get more benefit from hanging out in a position. Just the thing that we tell people is if you do go into those kind of things, you really want to start out very, very light. You know what I mean? So if you know
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go into a 10-minute hamstring stretch, you don't want to go the very first minute and just be like, you know what, let's see how deep I can go right now. You want to
Mm-hmm.
really allow that body to open up. But there will be a benefit to that extended hold. Yes.
Okay. Do you guys have any, or do you have any messages or comments of people having like a rebound tightening from them pulling into positions?
We haven't. I haven't gotten any of those emails. I mean, really try to stress not to push too deep into these
Mm-hmm.
positions. Like really be passive. I would assume that people are going to try to fall into positions. I haven't gotten any yet. We haven't gotten any feedback yet, which is great as far as any kind of thing like that happening. I'm trying to think real quick, run through my head. I can't think of anything that I've seen or heard of yet, which
Mm-hmm.
is, like I said, very positive. Um, I think as long as everyone takes that passive mentality, they're going to be safe, not have any issues.
Right. What about anything to do with nerve tension? What are your thoughts on nerve tension? So I've been told muscles and fascia like to be stretched, nerves like to be flossed,
Oh yeah, like wrapping and plot. Yeah.
no,
You know,
like almost like a
like
dynamic stretch or a
yeah,
active
like
stretch.
doing the wrist and things to floss out the forearm. I
Hmm.
know what you're talking about flossing. Yeah. You know what? I have not come across any research with how yin would affect like the actual nerves.
Hmm.
The overall nervous system, but not the actual nerves. So that would actually be some kind of maybe new to study to research to find out because I have in all of our inner studying we have not really come across that area.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in seeing that because from my own personal experience, I've experienced a lot of kind of rebound tension from trying to stretch my left hamstring after having back surgery.
Oh
And
yeah.
so the only thing that's really been able to help that is kind of these dynamic stretches. But now I'm able to get into some of these longer holds with ROMWOD. So
Very cool.
yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I
Um,
know for sure. I know my brother's gonna go to. He's actually gonna do like a week long Yen seminar very soon. So I could send him. He's gonna go and try to find out everything that we can find out about anything those kind of questions. So he's taking like a bunch of questions that we have to see if we can't know everything. I guess would be the
right,
thing. So
right.
that's one that I'll send him with for sure.
Love it. What do you think is the minimum effective dose to see measurable progress? Someone that has little to no time. What do you say they have to get done in a week to see progress?
Yeah. You know, we get that question a lot. Like, well, I have 5 minutes here, I have 5 minutes there. We tried that in the beginning. We did some testing of like what's the least amount of time that we could do. Um, what we found is kind of the least amount of time if you want to get any kind of progress would be to at least get one good pose in for 5 minutes. And if you could do that every day, you will at least see some benefit. Like if you could do the seated forward fold on Monday and then hit a lizard pose on Tuesday, as a bare minimum, you're looking at that 5 minute mark.
Hmm.
10 minutes is really where you're going to start to see at least a lot of improvement over time. Again, kind of that. I would really say 10 minutes is kind of the bare minimum. 5 minutes is like excessively bare. But that 10-minute mark, you're gonna get more if you can get that in, you know, 4, 5, 6 days a week.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Ideally, you know, as a goal, I try to make sure I do, you know, ROMWOD at least 6 days a week. I always have one day where I try to do nothing, let my body just completely recover.
Right.
But yeah, and so kind of, I would say the 10 minutes is a bare minimum. 10 minutes to 4 days a week would be, if you can do that, you're going to start to see some benefit. Obviously, with anything, the more that you can do it and the more dedicated you are, the quicker you'll see those improvements. But
Right. They say when in meditation, if you don't have 10 minutes, then you need 3 hours.
exactly,
Right.
right? That's it. Yeah, right. If you can't find 10 minutes, you got some problems.
Exactly. Um, and you've already started to talk about this a good bit, but what is the difference between doing these postures that utilize, body weight, stuff like that, versus traditional stretching using bands or
Yeah.
different tools like that?
Yeah. You know, again, a lot of times it just comes down to, your body falling into a natural position versus your body being forced into a position, So a lot of times the difference with ROMWOD too is that we're not so concerned with maybe aesthetics of how something might look. We're more concerned with where you're feeling it and how far, everyone's going to be so different. So for instance, a pigeon pose, if we were to put 40 people on the floor and do a pigeon pose, you know, correctly, everyone's going to look very different because all we're trying to do is isolate that outer hip, that outer glute muscle. And we're not going to force it. We're going to allow the body to find its proper alignment because if we were to look at everyone's hips, their actual hip sockets, all 40 people are going to have a different hip socket. So for us to force a position upon them and to, let's say, grab a band or put our hands on them and try to force them all into position, we could be doing more harm than good because their hips just aren't built that way. We actually at our seminars, we do tests and we test everyone there and we start discovering how our hips are designed and what is the best way for us to do those poses. Same with shoulders and all those things because everything is so imbalanced. So, if I were to grab a band and start forcing maybe a shoulder position, I might be doing a little more harm than good because I might be going to a place where I think that I'm attaining a position that is aesthetically looks right. Like this is where my shoulder should be in this position. But if I'm not aware of what my structure is, I might be actually going bone on bone. And that's where you're going to see a lot of people experiencing pain with a lot of movements. It's the same with ROMWOD. A lot of people, when they'll find a spot where you're trying to get your hips to go to a certain position, but what you're realizing is that your femur is actually hitting your pelvis, and you really can't go any further than that. And it's not that you're not flexible; it's just that that's the way you're structurally built. So what we seek to do is how can we allow your body to get the benefit of ROMWOD, get the benefit of that stretch the way that you're built, versus making you fall into a position and saying, "Hey, this is what it should look like." That's really like one of the biggest messages that we try to say is allow your body to find those places, allow your body to move to those positions where you're going to get the most benefit out of it, but don't force it. Allow that time to let those places open up and get to those end of range, I guess, positions. But not to say that we're not, there's a place, I believe, for all the other things. Obviously, if I'm trying to get some internal rotation in my shoulder, because I'm tight, it's really hard with a ROMWOD to get that position. It's very difficult to allow your body to internally rotate, your right arm. So, putting a band on the bar and, twisting it so that your shoulder will rotate and even having someone help, there's definitely a place for that. So we're not opposed to anything. I think that we're just another tool that you can have to getting the best range of motion that you can.
Makes perfect sense, man. I love it. How important are props? How important is that? Are the use of props for people that can't comfortably get into different positions?
I am seriously, I live with props. So you're talking to the man who's like designing an entire video series of nothing but props.
Yeah,
so
the prop man.
Seriously, when I do ROMWOD, I have to have an ab mat. I have to have a medicine ball next to me. If we're doing any kind of supine twist, I've got to have a band. Because I'm just tight. Like I really am. Like everyone that sees me is like, how come you're so inflexible? You're the owner of ROMWOD. I'm like, yeah, that's why. Like we created it because I'm
Right.
so inflexible. So I am a huge believer on props again because it's going to allow you to stay passive instead of being like, for me, if I don't use a prop, I have to use so much muscle to try to hold a position
Right.
that I'm not relaxed and I'm not getting anything out of it. So yeah, that's probably actually the number one email that I get. We get so many emails about like, hey, this position, I'm so tight or I can't get there. And my answer back is always props, props, props. Use that medicine ball, sit on that medicine ball, lay on that medicine ball. I mean, I'll do a lizard with that medicine ball on my stomach. I'll do a dragon and I'll sit on the medicine ball and it allows me to extend my chest up higher. It allows me to get more into my hip flexor. So I am all about the props. Yes, absolutely.
I need to get more into that. I got a couple yoga blocks
Yeah.
at my house, but I don't have any. I'd probably need something bigger, like a ball for those
Yeah,
forward folds and stuff like that.
absolutely. I'm a big fan of the medicine ball for
Yeah.
sure.
Do you guys have any positions, postures that you recommend people stay away from or get cleared before doing in terms of if they're injured? Do you have any guidelines on that?
We don't. On a case-to-case basis, we do get some emails about people like I had a knee surgery or I had this surgery. The two that I think can be the most tricky. Number one is the saddle pose. It's the number one email I have to respond to is the saddle pose, and that's just two areas of concern that I see a lot of people with is number one, their knees, and then number two, their ankles. So a lot of people talk about their ankles, just hurting so bad in that position. And a lot of people, it's their knees. So those are ones that I always talk, tread lightly on those. Start very passively. So again, that's where we go. For the saddle, I tell people to sit on a medicine ball, like literally sit up on top of that thing, and that's gonna be like the best way to begin the pose, in without putting any tension or pressure on your knees or your ankles because you're gonna be sitting on that ball. And so that's one that if you've got a knee surgery you're coming off, that's one that definitely I say take it very lightly. And then pigeon can be that way also, just because of that weird angle on your knee, putting that knee up in front of you. That's one where we see a lot of people that are trying to like maybe look like something they see in our videos, where again their bone structure and their knees are not ready for that position. So I recommend kind of like almost laying sideways and just trying to feel that in your hip versus your knee. I know for me, I have a problem with my right side, my IT band. It just is giving me issues for a long time. If I personally try to look like the pigeon pose, my right knee will bother me that day. So I have to really be conscious of that. Beyond those two poses are the only ones I can think of. I'm trying to think of anything else that can be, tricky for people that maybe have injuries or problems. The rest of them are pretty passive as far as you're not having like a lot of body weight sitting on top of you. Those two, your body weight is literally sitting on your knees.
Right.
That compression can cause a lot of pain and discomfort for people that might have injuries. Yeah.
Got a couple more questions for you guys.
Okay.
What, in your opinion, so I started the whole thing off by saying you guys have made yoga cool.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you think you've already done that? Like how have you done that? And then what are some ways, and this might be a question for Ryan finally, what are some ways that you guys are trying to do that in the future? How are you trying to reach people?
I'll start how we started, and then Ryan can jump in how he's made it cooler now. So he's definitely made it cooler than I have. When we started, we knew like right away, we're like, okay, so our biggest dilemma here is all these really big guys. How are we going to convince them that this is good for them? Like, they already move really well. They're already super strong. Like, how are we going to show them it's good for them? So we were just very fortunate in that some of the guys in our area that are regionals levels, games levels athletes that we talked to right away, were open to it. Luckily, one of them, Calvin, who's from CDR, and his team had been leading years. He had already been taking the yin classes at my brother's studio. So he knew the benefits already. So when we talked to him about it, he was like, okay. So for us, it was like, okay, let's get some really big guys and let's put them on a website and let's, advertise that way. Like, hey, this is pretty cool to do. But I'll be honest with you, beyond that, like before we brought Ryan on, like I was running social media and I was running it just like I might as well have been blind and just clicking buttons on my phone. Like I mean, luckily I knew Ryan and we were, we had such a good, we had a good relationship that we were emailing him all the time, like asking him ideas. It was, obviously super helpful in the beginning of ROMWOD and like just kind of giving us ideas like, hey, that's not a good post, or hey, that is a good post, or
Right.
so. But yeah, at the beginning it was literally like just shooting in the dark, and then Ryan can kind of tell you now what he does.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things now is, I mean, with social media, you have people that are, I mean, at the end of the day, are looking for attention. So they're looking to post the funniest ROMWOD video where they're cursing at the computer screen, or they're trying to find the best pose with the right lighting and, making sure their butt's up in the air the right direction. And so that obviously gains a lot of attention and a lot of eyes. So, I mean, I know there's people out there that are just doing it to get reposted and to get their pictures shown. And again, as long as they're doing ROMWOD and it's beneficial to them, we're going to utilize that, in a marketing sense. But I think the funnest thing that, people see and enjoy being inside of the CrossFit space and the lifting world, seeing it done inside of a gym with everyday, regular Joe Schmo athletes and individuals, I think that's what people are able to relate with so much more than it being a bunch of skinny, pretty yogis in a studio with wood floors and gray walls and symbols and signs on the sides that, when people turn it on, they're like, oh, I know that athlete, or, oh, I know that gym, or, hey, look, he's got that brute strength t-shirt on. I know those guys. This is cool. I can relate to it. So that's something that we've been able to utilize on social media, and it is cool. Like, it's not, as I jokingly say, this is not your grandmama's yoga.
Right.
Like, this is not the same type of music or flow or form that you have when you go into a yoga studio. And with a CrossFit athlete, male or female, the mindset, the atypical kind of personalities just doesn't vibe with that type of, chakra alignment and tuning and toning your brain and your heart, your soul. Now, again, all that stuff happens inside of ROMWOD. We just don't talk about it. We don't preach it. Daniel doesn't make it seem like it's yoga.
Right.
While it is, it's kind of has those hidden mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional properties that are hugely beneficial. So people start to see that, and that's when the light kind of really turns on for them and their eyes open. And I get the most joy seeing it when I see it come in, because they get it. They're seeing the overall picture, and they're finding these kind of hidden secrets. And it's more than just stretching at that point, where they're realizing it's doing more for them than just their body. They're getting a lot out of it. And I think that's what people are like, yo, I can do this in 20 to 30 minutes and it's more than just stretching. That's cool.
Yeah. He does a really good job of sneaking those kind of secondary benefits in there. I don't think this community vibes real well with the word chakra and stuff like that. So I think he does a great job of sneaking that stuff in. It seems much more practical. But it is there. It is there. The breathing is there. The relaxation and focus is all there. It's all there.
Yeah. And I also like to think that it's cool because it works. Like like that's been a really cool thing. Like the program works. And so I think that, like kind of what Ryan said, like when they start realizing how much it's helping them and they start talking about it, they get excited about it. And then they talk to their friends about it. And, so that was, I think that's kind of made it a little bit cool factor too. Like, hey, this actually works. It's not a gimmick. Like it's very simple. So that's one of the biggest compliments that I get personally is, just people saying, hey man, I just really like it. And I like that it's simple and it's effective, and thank you. So that's always a cool side effect too.
Where do you guys see ROMWOD in 5 years? Is it in the, dominated the CrossFit space? You're in other arenas. Where do you see it?
I don't know, Ryan, you want to take that one or?
Yeah, no, I'd love to,
Yeah.
because like when Jeremiah and Tiffany sat me down probably close to 2 years ago now and brought this idea to me, it was the same response. Oh, this is freaking brilliant, but how the hell are we going to get anybody, especially in the CrossFit space, to vibe with this and do this? And once I saw that and understood how the growth within CrossFit is still happening. People talk about it. Where's it going to go? Where's it going to be? I still see easily 5 to 7 years of this expansive growth inside the space. Working with the type of athletes, the level of athletes that we already are, being less than a year old, having athletes that have podiumed several years, having Olympic weightlifters that are vying for an opportunity to be on Team USA to make it to the Olympics next year and 4 years from now. I think, not saying we've maximized our opportunity with CrossFit, but the visibility is there. Now it's just reaching the outer limits of gyms and athletes and coaches and trainers. And that, I think, will happen over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, where just like any other major brand inside the space, you go into any gym, you see it, whether it's this brand of rig or it's that brand of protein, you see it. And that's how I see CrossFit taking ROMWOD over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. Now, from there, we're currently working with different baseball organizations, all the way to the major leagues. We have a pitching staff from an organization. We have the catchers program from a different organization. We have 3 NFL players on a team that made the playoffs this year, not going to the Super Bowl, but having 3 of their starters on the defense, picking it up and doing it daily. We know that that's going to translate to more of the team, more inside of that space. And I think that's where we'll see this going, is, not just for the fitnessers, not just for the exercises in the gym, but the people in the normal everyday gyms, the athletes that are from high school level that are taking their sport seriously, into the college strength and conditioning programs. I see it working there. So if you ask me quick, what's it look like in 5 years? I mean, I see hundreds of thousands of people doing these daily around the world in all different forms of gyms. Doesn't matter if it's your bro going to go hit biceps today and he needs to open up, or if it's, your swimmer who's got Olympic trials in February and needs to focus on breathing and also recovering and focusing on their range of motion too. So my expectation is ROMWOD being known as a household name inside the fitness space in that 5 to 7 year window.
Right. And I think you already touched on it. You gave this Yin Yoga like a different face, right? You put a buff guy on it rather than thin yogi. Which there's nothing wrong with that. There's just there are millions of other people that identify with one rather than the other. So I think they're both necessary to reach everyone.
Correct.
Exactly.
Jeremiah, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. And that's something that we talk about a lot. Like when we actually talked about this, we knew that our first goal was CrossFit, and that's just because that's the only space that I knew, and I had connections with, very limited connections with, but that we could go for. But we had, lots of sports outside of CrossFit doing it. And so we've always kind of known, and we have the capability to actually create, I guess you could say, other versions of ROMWOD in whatever space that we wanted. So let's say we wanted to make it golf ROMWOD, or, however we wanted to do it. We have the capability with our guys, our website guys, who are, I think we haven't talked about, but they're phenomenal. Just absolutely the most amazing technical guys in the world. So we are very fortunate to be working with these guys. We can literally create entirely different landing pages so that, say, someone from the golfing community, they would never see our website. They would actually never see the website, the cover with Noah Olson on it or something. They would see,
Right.
they would go to a website with, a golfer on it. And so it would be maybe less intimidating, because it can be intimidating for people outside of the CrossFit space for sure to go and see, you go to the homepage and it's Matty Rogers and Noah Olson, and you're like, wow, these people are pretty intense. We actually one time every now and then we get this thing where you can like have people look at your site and give you an audio feedback, and it was a guy that obviously does not work out, and his feedback was really funny because he was talking about how intense it was and how ROMWOD was not for him because he is not that big, and it was very interesting feedback. So
Nice.
it was kind of funny. It made us all laugh. So we actually felt good. We're like, all right, well, at least we know we're hitting the right demographic right now. So,
Right.
But yeah, exactly what Ryan said. Like we definitely we want to stay true to who we are, and that is trying to help the CrossFit community, just because that's something that I'm very passionate about, and so we want to make sure that we are true to ourselves. But I would love to jump outside and do all kinds of cool stuff outside of CrossFit.
Well, yeah, I definitely think you guys are already on your way to getting there.
Yeah.
My last question: what do you want to make absurd in 20 years? So a couple examples. 20 years ago, you might see a grocery store clerk smoking a cigarette. Nowadays, that would be absurd. 20 years ago, you might see people throwing, large amounts of trash out of their door as they're driving. Now that's absurd.
What do I see that's absurd?
What do you want to make absurd?
What do I want to make absurd? Oh, man.
Not stretching in kids sports, not stretching in high school strength and conditioning programs. That was the thing that I think caught on. The biggest thing for me was, I tell people all the time, legitimately, the last time I stretched was the sit and reach freaking test in junior high school. And that's ridiculous. And we went through high level sports in high school and traveling and club teams, and you get into college, and again, 9 times out of 10, I'm not saying all of them, but they don't do it properly. And we can almost guarantee that none of them are doing any sort of stretching or recovery process like this inside of those gyms. So how much better would their fitness be, and the recovery be, and the longevity inside the space be, if they were doing this at a young age? So that's, I think, from my perspective, is I think it would be ridiculous if there's not some form of this type of thing at all levels of sports, all the way down to the Pee Wee leagues in 20 years' time.
Yeah, and my answer is going to kind of be in the same area, but what I think is going on now that I think is absurd, that I would like to be absurd, is just in, I guess, youth sports in general, coming again from this background where I ran a volleyball club, and just my own opinion, I guess, is I would like to see a lot of what's going on in American sports changed and abolished as far as parents and coaches. I not necessarily having the kids' best interest in mind, but a lot of what's going on from my perspective is about money and about like prestige and things going on, so that, we see kids playing sports year round, and they're being forced to do so by their parents and their high school coaches, and they're being injured and they're being hurt, and they're not given the proper training to be able to do that. And it's just one of my pet peeves that I would love to see that, be absurd in 20 years, that that a kid from the age of 12 to 18 would play, say, soccer for 12 months out of the year until they're 18. And by the time they're 18, they've already had 2 knee surgeries.
Right.
And, just there's a lot of that going on. And in my opinion, I see it being driven by money. The club sports world is making tons of money, millions of dollars off these parents, these kids. And then you've got the high school coaches where I'm at. They literally tell the kids, if you don't play club sports, you don't get to play on my team. And the parents just feeding that with, my kid's going to get a college scholarship, so they have to play from the time they're 12. And, what I saw personally was that when kids were 18 years old, they quit because they were tired of playing sports, and it was sad. I would like to see the throwback to the days when kids play 3 sports and they CrossFit and they are stretching, and during the summer, they're going surfing. You know what I mean? Like for me, that would be a really cool thing to see our whole entire athletic community go, in a way, go back to the way it used to be.
That's a great answer. I love that. Guys, where can they find both of you personally, and where can they find more about ROMWOD?
Personally, for me, you can find me. I'm on all the social media: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Jeremiah Head. You can contact me through my gym, Zero Gravity CrossFit. That's the only way you can get a hold of me. That's pretty simple. That's for me. Ryan, you got all the handles for everything else.
Yeah, ROMWOD is every social channel is just at ROMWOD, ROMWOD, range of motion workout of the day. And I am the Rai Schultz on all the social media
And
channels.
that's all caps, right? The.
It should be, but I don't think they allow it, unfortunately.
And you have the blue check.
I don't yet. I'm working on that. That is a process I have in place. I can do it for brands and businesses, but I'm struggling on getting it done for myself.
Yeah, nice. And then you guys have you offer is it a 7-day or 14-day free trial?
So on the website, there's a steady and consistent 7-day free trial. If you find any of our Team ROMWOD athletes and click the link that they usually have posted on their social media or in their bios on Instagram, those will be an extended 14-day trial that they get to try ROMWOD out for free.
Nice. So if someone, tries it out for free, you guys, and they don't like it at the end of the 7 days, you will refund them their shitty range of motion right back to them, right?
Correct. 100% of it. And we'll even give them 10% extra on top because
Nice.
they deserve it.
Nice. Well, guys, this has been great. I learned a lot. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you.
All right. Talk to you soon.